I'll admit I've been pretty hard on the church the last couple of weeks. And I stand by what I've said. In fact, me and Marcus were talking, you had a revival at your church where the speaker pretty much came and said that the church needs to be more active and stand up, right?
Oh yeah, and they talked about how the church is at fault for where we are, and in order for any change to be made, the church has got to stand up. And the church is at fault for just bowing down. And I when I heard it, I couldn't help but smile because that was the exact point we talked about last week.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was awesome.
Well, we're about to talk about it again because we have to stand by what we say. And it's because that when churches grow more and more comfortable, like most any group, they get more and more progressive. And then you get headlines like this. So before I start, Marcus, you go to a, what's the denomination? I can't think of it off the top of my head.
It's technically Assembly of God.
Okay,
but,
so Pentecostal.
It falls under Pentecostal, yeah.
And I've grown up in the Southern Baptist Church. My dad's a Southern Baptist minister. So, don't think that this is some sort of petty squabble between, Protestants or within Protestants, because I think we're all Protestant under that. Okay. Get ready for this. Big name Southern Baptist Church brags about transgender, LGBT, straight, single, married, divorced, and cohabitating people serving in their church. I'm shocked the Southern Baptist Church is allowing this to be said from its pulpit, as someone who has grown up in it. And I'm just going to play the whole video. So, let me see. Which one is it? I recently redid my hotkeys. There it is. Here we go. Oh, now is when you choose to buffer? Seriously?
We have longtime members of 50 plus years greeting and welcoming new people who are walking in for the very first time. We have those who love traditional music and hymns, and those who know only contemporary music. We have choir lovers and non-music lovers, a pipe organ, and loud electric guitars. We have the 99-year-old World War II hero and the millennial immigrant who doesn't know anything about American history sitting on the same row and listening and learning about Jesus together. We have transgender, LGBTQ, straight, single, married, divorced, and cohabitating people. These same people attend, listen, serve, grow, and give.
We have transgender, LGBTQ, straight, single, married, divorced, and cohabitating people. These same people attend, listen, serve, grow, and give.
We have Democrats, Republicans, independents, and non-registered people. We have documented and undocumented people. We have politically active and socially responsible people. We have pro-life and pro-choice and pro-war and pro-peace. We have Support the Blue and Black Lives Matter, sitting together and serving together. We have Trumpers and never Trumpers. We have Biden supporters and Harris supporters. We have the ultra-wealthy and the indigent sitting together, singing together, and serving together. We have the social elite and the social outcast. We have the best dressed and the barely dressed. And in the midst of all of this, we have one of the most beautiful worship experiences you can possibly imagine. Because all of us gather around the good news of Jesus and the one who is changing us and the one who unifies us. And we celebrate how he has set us all free from our bondage to sin and given us eternal life. Jose, we are First Orlando. We have longtime members of...
Okay, so, there you go. You're back, Marcus. So that was First Baptist Church, Orlando. And this isn't some fringe church in the Southern Baptist Convention. See, they were set to host the Southern Baptist Convention back in 2020. They couldn't because of COVID. But they're senior pastor was going to be the chairman of the, or was the chairman of the 2020 Southern Baptist Convention. This was his senior associate pastor saying this from the pulpit, I assume on a Sunday morning. So let's take a second to process this, and we'll get to the shocking stuff in a second. But I wanted to ask you about this too, Marcus. We're going to end this debate once and for all. Hymns or contemporary music? As someone who loves the old hymns, I still have to say that unless you're an old country church where there really aren't any young families around and it's just the older generations who are going to stay there until they die, then you need to have a solid contemporary worship service. And the reason I say that, it's mathematics based. Most people who are saved get saved before the age of 18, something like 85%. Contemporary music is going to draw this crowd in much more than hymns do. Therefore, most of your resources and time should be put into kids and youth, including in the music, because sharing the gospel with the most amount of people and therefore letting them have the opportunity to accept Christ is the most important function of the church. Marcus, do you agree with me or no?
I do agree. Now, I do love some old hymns.
I do too.
There's some I love. So I love whenever we throw in, I'll Fly Away or into
you can have fun with those songs, though.
Yes, you do. But the fact of the matter is, people don't like the same old thing. So you can't sit there and sing hymn after hymn after hymn. And even if you do some contemporary music, you've got to stay up to date on the contemporary music because people like new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They like to experience, new points of view on the Bible because, the Bible is, it's very factual, but at the same time, it's very subjective. So they like to see new points of views on what it can mean.
I'm a little worried with you saying that. I'm a little worried with you saying that because the gospel message doesn't change. That's why I like to say is that the gospel message doesn't change. The only thing that should change is how you engage the culture, because that does change. But the core message should never change.
Well, that's what I'm saying about like the Bible is factual. The core message is factual. There's no way around it. But stuff like the Revelation, some of that stuff. As far as how you see how some of that's going to end up, some of that's subjective. There's going to be different scenarios where you may read a Bible verse one day where you're angry, and you read it and you can interpret it one way, but you may read it another day when you're happy, and read it and it may mean a whole different thing to you. So I mean that's what I mean by it being subjective. On that note, not that you can just take it and twist it however you want to.
All right, good. I was hoping we were on the same page on that. I was about to be a little worried.
Well, I hate to say it, but things in the world change, and the Bible talks about it has some stuff that you wouldn't do in today's society. I mean, you wouldn't give your child away because you can't pay a debt. So I mean, we wouldn't do that in today's society. Stuff changes, but the core principle stays the same.
All right. I'm glad we're on the same page. Now to the more important things. As if there's anything more important than knowing that the core gospel doesn't change. But to the more important things of this video. First off, the trans ideology. Let's start there because we talk about it so much. I feel like I can talk for hours on this subject off the top of my head. But this trans ideology, which he proudly proclaims as being there and even serving in the church, is diametrically opposed to correct Christian doctrine. Now, don't get me wrong. I do not want you to misunderstand what I am saying here. Church is a place for sinners. And we want sinners in the pew because that's all of us. Trans people are no different. They are not beyond God's grace. And we want them to hear about God's grace, and we want them to hear the gospel. That being said, proudly proclaiming that they serve in your church is incompatible with who a church should officially represent them, as far as their staff goes and their outreach goes. And this is for 3 reasons. 1, it's an attack on truth. Plain and simple, boys are boys, girls are girls, men are men, women are women. There's no switching. That leads directly to the second point, which is that God is truth. Jesus says, I'm the truth, the way, the truth, and the life, right? And if we truly believe that if God made us, male and female, he created us, and if he knew us before we were born and knitted us together in the womb, then if he accidentally put a man's soul into a woman's body, or vice versa, not just once, but in hundreds of thousands of people, because that seems to be the way that this world is trending, then that would be saying he's not omnipotent or omniscient, all-powerful and all-knowing, the objective truth. No, see, at that point, he would be a bumbling idiot at best. And at worst, an evil, malicious deity. See, this ideology is, like I said, completely and irrevocably opposed to the God we serve. And last, it destroys the idea of Christian womanhood and womanhood in general, as we talk about quite often. We started the show with a whole segment about that. It makes me laugh, but it also burns me every time they try to make out that we hate women. And this is not an exhaustive list of why they shouldn't be allowed to serve. I'm sure Marcus will come up with another example pretty easily because there's just so many. But that doesn't mean it's not it doesn't make a 100% case why they shouldn't, regardless of the fact that there's more cases. Am I right, Marcus?
Well, I think on this whole video, I think, it depends on the definition of the way they say they have transgender serving. Because really the church needs to be more outgoing. The people that's in the church, usually 85% of those, 85% of those are the saved. And if you're worried about them and catering to them, you're doing it the wrong way, because if you're having to cater
100%.
to them, you're doing something wrong, because they're not as strong a Christian as you think they are. So, you've got to bring people in. So, if they're using the transgenders for an outreach to bring more in, and that's what they define as serving, then that's great, because you need to bring them in. They've got to learn, So now, if you talk about them serving as a Sunday school teacher, retaining the views of the Bible or the church, that's a whole different subject. But the video was so vague that if it's talking about they're serving as an outreach, and that's huge. Then that can be huge for the church, because that's what we need. We need to outreach these transgenders. We need an outreach to the gays. We need to reach the lost, and you can't do that by sitting in the pew and not reaching the people that need to be reached.
I get what you're saying, and like I said, there should definitely, we want sinners in the pews, and I think I say that like 18 more times throughout the rest of this segment in my script. But again, it's a lot different having them outreaching and sitting in the pews and learning to actively being an official representation of church and church staff, of Sunday school teachers, even nursery workers. I know I wouldn't want my nursery worker at church to be a transgender who brags about it, because again, if it's diametrically opposed to God's words, which it is, as we just went over, and you're still proudly proclaiming it, not who I want watching my kid, when I have one, in the nursery.
Well, that's why I said what I said about serving, as far as serving for outreach. That's really about the only thing that I see that transgenders they're still transgenders, but going to church. That's the only type of serving they should really be doing, is more of an outreach program. But as far as tainting the Bible and the church views, I agree that shouldn't happen. So but I do think it's something good for them to reach out to more people like them and bring them in.
All right. Well, that's definitely something each church is going to have to prayerfully consider, for sure.
You've got to bring them in somehow.
You do have to bring them in somehow, but I would say that having
unfortunately, it's a lot easier for the transgenders to bring in more transgenders than it is to have.
So here's
like
a
Mary
question.
Eve.
Here's a real quick question. Do you think if someone who was transgendered and then got saved, one, do you think they would still be calling themselves, or do you think they still should, if it's a man and before he got saved, he was a woman, or he believed he was a woman, called himself a woman, whatever. Do you think that that he could still do that while still being saved?
I think
Since it is so diametrically opposed.
Whenever you become saved and you repent of those sins, the Bible says to not just ask for forgiveness, but to turn away from it and stop doing it. So I think as far as being a true Christian, you can't be a true Christian and be transgender or gay. But it's one of those. It's a rough path to go on because you need to reach these people, like I said, and it may hurt the church for a while. It may taint some of the trying to think, the congregation may taint some of it, but unfortunately, the congregation is not meant to be perfect, and I'll stand by that 100%. It's never supposed to be perfect, and I think that you need to reach them, whether you like the way you reach them or not. I mean, I hate to say it, but sometimes you got to do stuff you don't like to get stuff done. But if this is the way to get them in, this is the way to change them, then I think it could be a plausible way to get them into church. And even if they're not Christian, while they're outreaching and getting them to church, getting them there is the first step. Getting them there and getting them to listen is the first step, whether who's getting them there saved or not. So, I hate that you're using somebody who's opposed to your views. But if they're able to bring more in and you can save more lives and teach more about Jesus, then absolutely. But you can't let it taint the church's view and the church's stance. That's the only thing. You have to be whole with what you're teaching. You have to believe and be steady in what you're teaching and what you're preaching. You can't let it affect that. But in order for reaching the lost, it's a great way to do it, because that's going to be the best way to get them in there, is their own kind.
Well, we're definitely going to have to revisit this in a future episode, because we do have a lot more through this segment and a couple more to get to, but I think I get your point right there.
A lot of people may look at it differently than I do,
yeah.
But
I think it's a rich discussion we should have for sure.
It is.
All right.
It is. Okay.
Let's see. Then, of course, moving on with the story. Then, of course, he hits the LGBTQ, whatever the letters are now. I research this every week, and I cannot keep up. But in several places in God's Word, he speaks out about this. I think this one is talked to death, and there really isn't much more I can add to the conversation. But to proudly say that these people are serving again, are serving is an abomination. Again, they should be in church. Church is a place for sinners, but leadership is not the place. And then there are a few more. Some of them I really couldn't care about, some of them. But this one really burns me. He proudly proclaims that he has pro-choice people. The church should never be happy about abortions, because it's killing kids. It's like number 6 on the 10 Commandments of things you should not do. So if anybody in your church who's in a leadership position, Sunday school, nursery, pastors, I hope not, believe that it's okay for women to have the choice to kill their kids, how about you sit them back down in the pew and tell them to listen a little bit better this time, because that is certainly what they need in their life right now, is to be sat down sat down in church and for them to actually, listen some. But this video is so despicable because after proudly proclaiming that all of the people who we want in church pews but not serving in the church are actually serving in the church, he proudly proclaims that they are free from the bondage of sin. Living your life believing you're a woman, even though you're a biological male, is not free from the bondage of sin. It is in fact the very opposite, where the bondage of sin is pulling you down into the darkest depths where you can't even see that it is wrong. Killing your baby is not freedom from the bondage of sin. It's murder. Again, number 6 on the 10 Commandments. If you really care about these people, you won't tell them honeyed words that are sweet on their ears. You tell them the truth, hope they accept it, but it's on them, and shame on any church that lets this persist, including First Baptist Orlando. See, the American church is dying. When a church like this, one that was going to host the Southern Baptist Convention just 2 years ago, starts going woke like this, we are in serious trouble. This is going to take a lot of prayer, as well as people who are courageous enough to speak the truth to power to rise up in our churches. And this is going to offend some people. You have to know that, but true Christianity often does. But if we don't, the American church isn't just going to not be a check against our cultural decline, it'll actually feed into it. So every single one of us is going to have to answer for our actions to God. And we are all going to have things that we are ashamed of. I know there's going to be things that I am, but don't let one of those things be you sat by and let lies propagate unchecked in your church, even if they came from the pulpit. And don't think for a second that it shouldn't go unchecked if it came from the pulpit. Marcus, any last words?
When I watched this video, I didn't know if it was honest hard for me to tell this pastor was bragging about the fact that they had these people and supporting. It was hard to tell if he was like saying, "Hey, we support you," or just showing, "Hey, look, we have everybody here. There's somebody like you. There's no shame in coming here because we have everybody." But I don't know what he was trying to accomplish with it. But I do know that letting, the pro-choice and the transgenders serve as a active leader in the church is completely wrong. But saying, "Hey, look, we change everybody's lives, whether you're transgender, gay, pro-choice. God can change your life if they're using it in that manner. That's fine. I wish I had more context to this statement in this church, because there's some stuff I want to elaborate on as far as we need this in our church as far as having the lost, but we don't need it to corrupt the church either. So I wish I had more background information on this church and on this statement here, because there can be good stuff about this statement, but on that same token, it can be very, very bad. So it's a double-edged sword as to what it can be. I just wish I had more context to it.
I get you. Unfortunately, we don't have that.
No.
And again, like I said before, this is definitely a conversation that we should definitely come back and plan around in a future episode.